The billionaire's hands trembled as he stared at the photograph. The woman standing before him, homeless, desperate, living illegally in his mansion, was holding proof of something impossible. His grandmother's face smiled back at him from that faded picture, her arm wrapped around a little girl who would grow up to be Celeste Harper. And scrawled on the back, in handwriting he'd recognize anywhere, were 4 words that would shatter everything he thought he knew. "Promise me you'll remember." Dominic Ashford had come here to evict squatters. Instead, he'd just discovered a debt 50 years old. A promise buried with his grandmother. And 2 little girls whose future now rested in the hands of a man who'd spent his entire life running from exactly this kind of responsibility. What happened in the next 72 hours didn't just change their lives. It exposed a secret his family had kept hidden for decades. And it all started with the sound of children's laughter in a house that was supposed to be empty. Welcome to Echoes and Endings. If you're loving this story, and you want to find out what happens next, quickly hit that like button and subscribe, because what you're about to watch would leave you wondering. Tell me in the comments which city you're watching from. I'd really love to know. Now let's dive into this amazing story. October 2019. Dominic Ashford hadn't set foot in his grandmother's Connecticut estate in 7 years. 7 years of building his empire. 7 years of 16-hour days and red-eye flights. 7 years of telling himself he'd visit next month, until next month became next year, and next year became never. Eleanor Ashford had raised him in that house after his parents died. She'd taught him everything. How to read people, how to negotiate, how to turn ambition into achievement. But she'd also taught him something else, something he'd spent his adult life trying to forget. That success without purpose was just expensive loneliness. She'd died 3 years ago. He'd been in Tokyo closing a deal. He'd missed the funeral. The estate had sat empty ever since, a monument to his guilt. Now his accountant was pressuring him to sell. The property taxes alone were bleeding money, and Dominic had never been sentimental about real estate. He'd scheduled the meeting with the realtor for 10 a.m. on a Tuesday. He arrived early, wanting one last walk through the halls before strangers turned his memories into square footage and market value. The October air was crisp as he pulled up the long driveway. The mansion looked exactly as he remembered. Victorian architecture, wraparound porch, the oak tree his grandmother had planted when she was a girl. But something was different. The gardens weren't overgrown. The windows weren't dusty. And hanging from the clothesline in the side yard, impossible but unmistakable, was laundry. Children's clothing, moving gently in the autumn breeze. Dominic's jaw tightened. Squatters. He'd heard about this happening to vacant properties. Desperate people finding empty houses, moving in, hoping no one would notice. Part of him understood the logic. The other part, the part that had just driven 3 hours to confront his past, was furious. He didn't knock. It was his house. The front door was unlocked. He stepped inside, and the smell hit him first. Not mildew or decay, but bread. Fresh bread. And coffee. And something else, something that made his chest tighten with a memory he couldn't quite place. Lavender. His grandmother's favorite. "Girls, breakfast is almost ready." A woman's voice called from somewhere deeper in the house. "Zara, did you finish your homework? Imani, I better not see you on that tablet again." The sound of running feet. Children's laughter. A domestic scene playing out in his grandmother's kitchen like it belonged there. Dominic moved through the foyer, his expensive shoes silent on the hardwood floors his grandmother had polished every Sunday. The house was clean. More than clean, it was cared for. Fresh flowers sat in the vase on the hall table. The chandelier sparkled. Even the portrait of his great-grandfather had been dusted. He rounded the corner into the kitchen and stopped. 3 people froze, staring back at him. The woman was in her early 40s, beautiful in that exhausted way that spoke of too many responsibilities and not enough sleep. She wore jeans and a faded sweater, and she was holding a spatula like she might need to use it as a weapon. Behind her, 2 girls. 8 and 11 maybe. Wide-eyed. Terrified. For a moment nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then the older girl, Imani, grabbed her sister's hand and pulled her backward. The woman, Celeste, though he didn't know her name yet, stepped between Dominic and her daughters. Her voice was steady, but he could see her hands shaking. "I know what this looks like," she said. "I know we shouldn't be here. But please just give me 5 minutes to explain before you call the police." Dominic had practiced this moment in the car. He'd planned exactly what he'd say. Firm but fair. "This is private property. You need to leave. I'll give you until tomorrow to find somewhere else." But something stopped him. Maybe it was the way she was protecting her daughters. Maybe it was the smell of his grandmother's lavender sachets. Maybe it was the fact that this house felt more like a home than it had in years. 5 minutes, he heard himself say. Celeste's shoulders dropped half an inch. Relief, but not safety. "Not yet." "Thank you," she whispered. Then louder to her daughters. "Girls, go upstairs. Now." "But Mom," Imani started. "Now, baby. Please." The girls hesitated, then ran. Dominic heard their footsteps on the stairs, then the sound of a door closing, protecting them even from this conversation. Smart. Celeste gestured to the kitchen table. His grandmother's table, where he'd eaten 1,000 meals. "Sit. Please. I'll make this quick." Dominic sat. Not because she'd asked, but because his legs suddenly felt unreliable. She didn't sit. Instead, she stood by the counter, gripping the edge like it was the only thing keeping her upright. "My name is Celeste Harper," she began. 3 years ago, my husband, Devon, died in a construction accident. A crane malfunction. The company fought the insurance claim. We lost everything fighting back, our savings, our house, our everything." Her voice cracked, but she pushed forward. "I'm a nurse. Was a nurse. But medical debt from Devon's final weeks. Then losing our income. I couldn't keep up. We were evicted 8 months ago. I tried shelters, but they were full. Always full. I kept the girls in school, kept them clean, kept them fed, but we were living in my car." Dominic's throat tightened. He'd donated millions to homelessness initiatives, written checks at charity galas, but he'd never sat across from it, never looked it in the eyes. "Then winter came," Celeste continued. "And I couldn't let them freeze. I drove around looking for vacant houses, abandoned places, somewhere warm. And I found this one. I saw the for sale sign had fallen over. The grass was overgrown. I thought nobody cared about it anymore. So you broke in." His voice was flat. The back window was already broken. "I just climbed through." She looked at him directly now, defiant. "Yes, I broke into your house. I'm guilty. But I'm not sorry. Not when the alternative was watching my daughters suffer." Silence stretched between them. "That was 8 months ago," Dominic said slowly. "You've been here 8 months." "Yes." "And you didn't think someone would notice?" "I hoped they wouldn't." Celeste's chin lifted. "I've been careful. I fixed the window. I maintained everything. I've been paying the utilities. Found the account information in some old mail and set up payments for my waitressing money. I even fixed the leak in the upstairs bathroom. This house. It's beautiful. It deserves to be cared for." Dominic felt something twist in his chest. She'd done more for this place in 8 months than he had in 7 years. "The gardens," he said. "That was you. Your grandmother had rose bushes. They were dying. I couldn't." She trailed off. "I found her gardening journal in the library. She wrote about every plant every season. It felt wrong to let them die when she'd loved them so much." His grandmother's journal. He'd forgotten about that. "How did you know it was her house?" he asked. "How did you know about my grandmother?" Celeste's expression shifted. Something flickered across her face. Fear, maybe, or recognition. "I didn't. Not at first." She moved to the counter, opened a drawer, and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. "But then I found this. In the attic. And I realized. This wasn't random." She unwrapped the cloth carefully, reverently, and placed a photograph on the table between them. Dominic's world tilted. The photograph was old. The colors faded to that vintage warmth that marked it as decades past. But the image was crystal clear. His grandmother, Eleanor Ashford, maybe 30 years old, standing in front of this very house. And beside her, holding her hand, was a little black girl, no more than 6 or 7. The girl was smiling, wearing a yellow dress, her hair in 2 perfect braids. But it was the back of the photograph that made Dominic's hands go numb. In his grandmother's handwriting, Celeste Marie, age 6. Summer 1983. Promise me you'll remember. He looked up at Celeste Harper, at the woman standing in his kitchen, at her face, older now but unmistakable. That's you, he whispered. That's me. Tears were streaming down her face now. I didn't remember until I found this picture. I was so young. But then it all came back. The summers the first spent here. Your grandmother teaching me to read. Teaching me to garden. She was everything to me. How? Dominic's voice was hoarse. How did you know her? My mother was her housekeeper. We lived in town, but Mom worked here 6 days a week. She'd bring me along during summer break. Your grandmother, she didn't treat me like the help's daughter. She treated me like I mattered. Celeste wiped her eyes. She used to say, every child deserves someone who believes in them. And she believed in me. Here's what I need to know from you. Have you ever met someone who changed your life just by believing in you? Someone who saw something in you that nobody else did? Drop it in the comments. I want to hear your stories. Dominic stared at the photograph, at his grandmother's young face, at the promise written on the back. What happened? He asked quietly. Why did you stop coming? Celeste's face crumpled. My mother got sick. Cancer. We moved to Boston for her treatment. I was 12. I wanted to write to your grandmother to visit, but everything was chaos. Mom died when I was 14. I went into foster care. I lost everything, including this. She touched the photograph with trembling fingers. I thought I'd imagined it sometimes. This house. This garden. A woman who made me feel like I could be anything. And then I broke into an abandoned mansion to save my daughters from freezing, and I found proof that it was all real. Dominic couldn't breathe. His grandmother had never mentioned Celeste. Never mentioned any of this. Why? There's something else, Celeste said softly. Something I need to show you. In the attic. It's why I think your grandmother would have wanted me to find this place. I think she left something for both of us. She turned toward the hallway, toward the stairs that led to the attic. And Dominic realized that whatever was up there would change everything he thought he knew about the woman who raised him. The attic stairs creaked under their weight. Dominic hadn't been up here since he was a teenager, back when this dusty space had been his hideout during the turbulent years after his parents' death. Celeste moved with the confidence of someone who'd explored every corner of this house. She pulled the chain on the overhead bulb, and weak yellow light spilled across boxes, old furniture, and the accumulated memories of 3 generations. Over here, she said, leading him to the far corner. Behind a stack of Christmas decorations and his grandfather's old trunk was a wooden chest Dominic had never seen before. Or maybe he had and just never paid attention. How much of his grandmother's life had he simply overlooked? Celeste knelt beside it. It was locked when I found it. Took me 3 weeks to find the key. It was taped under her jewelry box. I almost didn't open it. It felt like reading someone's diary. But then I thought, maybe there's something in here that explains why I ended up back in this house. She lifted the lid. Inside were letters. Dozens of them, bundled with faded ribbon. Photographs. Documents. And a leather journal with Eleanor Ashford's name embossed on the cover. Dominic reached for the journal with shaking hands. His grandmother had been a meticulous record keeper, but he'd never seen this one. He opened to a random page. The date read June 15, 1983. Celeste is reading at a 5th grade level now, and she's only 6. Her mind is extraordinary. She devours every book I give her. Her mother, Patricia, works so hard, but I see the exhaustion in her eyes. She's raising this brilliant child alone, working 2 jobs, and still finding time to smile. I asked Patricia today if I could set up a college fund for Celeste. She refused. Too proud. But I'm doing it anyway. Some gifts don't require permission. Dominic's vision blurred. He flipped forward, months passing in pages. Celeste asked me today why some people have so much while others have so little. How do you explain systemic injustice to a 7-year-old? I told her the world isn't fair, but that doesn't mean we stop fighting to make it better. She said, "When I grow up, I'm going to help people who are hurting." I believe she will. More pages. More years. Patricia's cancer is back. Stage 4. Celeste doesn't know yet. Patricia made me promise not to tell her until after the school year ends. She wants her daughter to have one more summer of childhood before everything changes. I'm terrified. Not just for Patricia but for what happens to Celeste when the inevitable happens. I've tried to talk to Patricia about guardianship, about taking Celeste in, but she won't discuss it. I think she knows what I'm offering would be complicated. A wealthy white woman raising a black child in 1989? The world isn't ready. Maybe Patricia's right. But God, my heart is breaking. Dominic looked up at Celeste. She was crying silently, reading a letter from the pile. "Your grandmother tried to adopt me," Celeste whispered. "After my mom died. She fought for custody. But the state, they said her age was a concern. She was 72. And they questioned whether she could provide culturally appropriate care for a black teenager. That's what the letter says. Culturally appropriate care." Her voice turned bitter. "So instead they put me with the Johnsons, who were black and 30 years younger and couldn't have cared less about me. I ran away 3 times. Your grandmother, she wrote to me every week for 2 years. But the Johnsons screened my mail. I never got the letters. Not until now." Dominic's hands were shaking as he reached for the bundle of letters she was holding. Envelope after envelope, all addressed to Celeste Marie Harper, care of the Johnson residence. All stamped, "Returned to sender." But they hadn't been returned. They'd been kept. Hidden in this chest like evidence of a crime. "She never stopped trying," Celeste said. "Even after I aged out of foster care, she was still looking for me. There's a letter here from a private investigator, dated 2015. 4 years before she died. She was still searching." Dominic felt something crack open in his chest. His grandmother had carried this grief for decades. Had died still wondering what happened to the little girl she'd loved. "Why didn't she tell me?" His voice was raw. "Why didn't she ever mention you?" Maybe she tried. Celeste pulled out another document. A birth certificate. But not hers. Maybe she was waiting for the right time. Or maybe she knew you weren't ready to hear it. She handed him the birth certificate, and Dominic's world fractured completely. The name on the certificate: Eleanor Patricia Ashford. Mother: Patricia Marie Harper. Father: unknown. Date of birth: September 3rd, 1954. "I don't understand," Dominic said, but even as he spoke, the pieces were clicking into place with terrible clarity. "Your grandmother had a daughter," Celeste said softly. "In 1954. When she was 17. In 1954, an unwed white teenager having a baby with a black man? That child would have been taken from her. So she gave her up. Gave my grandmother up." The attic seemed to tilt. "Patricia Harper wasn't just your grandmother's housekeeper," Celeste continued. "She was her daughter. Which means Eleanor Ashford was my great-grandmother. Which means you and I, we're family." Dominic couldn't speak. Couldn't think. The photograph downstairs made sense now. The promise. The desperate search. His grandmother hadn't been trying to help a housekeeper's child out of charity. She'd been trying to save her great-granddaughter. "There's more," Celeste said, and her voice was shaking now. "In the journal. The last entry. It's dated 2 weeks before she died. I think you need to read it." She handed him the journal, opened to the final page. Dominic recognized his grandmother's handwriting, but it was shakier now, the letters uneven with age and illness. If you're reading this, then I'm gone. And if God is merciful, Celeste has somehow found her way home. I've failed so many people in my life. Failed my daughter by giving her up. Failed my granddaughter by losing her. But I'm leaving instructions with my lawyer. Instructions I haven't even told Dominic about yet. Because I know my grandson. I know his heart, even if he's spent years building walls around it. The house. The estate. The trust fund I've set up. It's not just for Dominic. It's for Celeste too. She deserves her inheritance. She deserves to know she came from love, not abandonment. If Dominic is reading this with Celeste beside him, then something impossible has happened. Then maybe there's such a thing as fate after all. Take care of each other. You're all the family either of you has left. The overhead bulb flickered once, then went dark, plunging them into shadow. In the darkness, Dominic heard Celeste's breathing, quick and scared. And from somewhere downstairs, a sound that made his blood run cold. The front door opening. Footsteps in the foyer. A man's voice, loud and authoritative. Police. We got a report of squatters at this address. If anyone's in here, come out now. Celeste's gasp cut through the darkness. The girls. She was moving before Dominic could react, stumbling toward the attic stairs. He grabbed her arm. Wait, he hissed. Let me handle this. You don't understand. If they find us, if they take my daughters. Her voice was pure panic. I'll lose them. The state will take them. I have no address, no stable income. I'm living illegally in someone else's house. They'll put Zara and Imani in foster care and I'll. Celeste. He gripped her shoulders, forced her to look at him. I own this house. You're not squatters. You're my guests. What? Trust me. He didn't wait for her response. He moved down the attic stairs, then the main staircase, each step measured and calm even though his heart was hammering. 2 officers stood in the foyer. One was older, maybe 50, with the weary expression of someone who'd seen too much. The younger one had his hand resting on his belt, near his weapon. Gentlemen, Dominic said, using the voice that had closed billion-dollar deals. I'm Dominic Ashford. I own this property. Is there a problem? The older officer's eyes narrowed. We got a call from a concerned neighbor. Said they'd seen movement in a house that's supposed to be vacant. Possible squatters. Mrs. Chen next door, Dominic said smoothly, as if he'd talked to the neighbor yesterday instead of 7 years ago. She's very observant. But there's been a misunderstanding. I have guests staying here while I'm in town handling some estate matters. Guests? The younger officer looked skeptical. Yes. A family friend and her children. They're helping me sort through my late grandmother's belongings. Footsteps on the stairs. Celeste appeared, and Dominic felt his chest tighten at her composure. She'd transformed in 30 seconds, wiped her tears, straightened her shoulders, put on a smile that was gracious and completely unafraid. Officers, she said warmly. I'm so sorry for the confusion. Is everything all right? Behind her, 2 small faces peered around the banister. Zara and Imani, watching with wide, terrified eyes. The older officer's expression softened slightly. Ma'am, we're just following up on a call. Do you have identification? Dominic saw Celeste's fingers twitch. Her ID would show an address that didn't match. Would show her as homeless. Actually, Dominic interjected, is that necessary? I can provide documentation that I own this property. These are my guests. Unless there's been some crime reported. The younger officer bristled. Sir, we're just doing our job. And I appreciate that, Dominic said, still calm. But I'm unclear on what law you think is being broken. This is private property. I'm the owner. These are my invited guests. Unless you have a warrant. The 2 officers exchanged glances. The older one sighed. No warrant. But sir, if you could just provide some documentation of ownership. Of course. Dominic pulled out his phone, pulled up the property records he'd reviewed that morning in preparation for the realtor meeting. Here. Tax records. Deed information. All in my name. The older officer examined the phone screen, then nodded slowly. All right. Mr. Ashford, I apologize for the intrusion. We had to follow up on the call. I understand completely. Thank you for your diligence. The officers turned to leave, but the younger one paused at the door. His eyes lingered on Celeste, on her worn sweater and nervous hands, then flicked to the two little girls on the stairs. You folks have a good day, he said, and something in his tone made Dominic's jaw tighten. The door closed. A car engine started. Silence. Then Celeste's knees buckled. Dominic caught her before she hit the floor. She was shaking, great shuddering tremors that ran through her entire body. Mom! Imani rushed down the stairs, Zara right behind her. They wrapped themselves around their mother, all three of them collapsing into a heap of tears and relief. I thought they'd take you, Zara sobbed. I thought they'd take you away. I know, baby. I know. But we're okay. We're okay. Dominic stepped back, giving them space. His hands were shaking too. He'd just lied to the police. Had obstructed an investigation. Had claimed squatters as guests. Why had he done that? But he knew why. The journal entries. The photograph. The promise his grandmother had made and never been able to keep. Take care of each other. You're all the family either of you has left. He looked at this family huddled on his grandmother's floor. Strangers this morning. Family by blood this afternoon. And now what? What happened next? Let me ask you something. Have you ever had to make a split-second decision that changed everything? A moment where you chose between what was legal and what was right? Drop your story in the comments. I'm genuinely curious how you'd handle this situation. After the tears subsided, after the girls were calmed down and sent back upstairs, Dominic and Celeste sat at the kitchen table again. The photograph lay between them. His grandmother's journal. The birth certificate. Evidence of a family tree neither of them had known existed. What now? Celeste asked quietly. You saved us today. But tomorrow? Next week? That neighbor will call again. The police will come back. And next time maybe you won't be here. Dominic had been thinking about this. Thinking about it through every second of that confrontation with the police. My lawyer, he said slowly, mentioned something in my grandmother's will that I never followed up on. A trust. I thought it was just standard estate planning, but now you think it might have been for me. For you. For your daughters. My grandmother's great-great-granddaughters. The words felt strange in his mouth. Family. He'd been alone for so long he'd forgotten what that word meant. I need to make some calls, he continued. Need to review the full will, the trust documents. But Celeste, I'm not kicking you out. I need you to understand that. This house is as much yours as it is mine. Maybe more. I can't accept that. My grandmother would have wanted this. You know it. I know it. She spent 30 years trying to find you. Trying to fix what was broken. And somehow, impossibly, you found your way back here. That means something. Celeste's eyes were wet again. I've spent 8 months feeling like a criminal. Like I was stealing from you. You weren't stealing. You were coming home. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. There's something else, Dominic said. The realtor. I was supposed to meet him here this morning. To list the house. To sell it. Celeste's face went pale. I'm calling him right now, Dominic continued, pulling out his phone, to cancel. This house stays in the family. Where it belongs. He dialed. The realtor answered on the second ring. David. It's Dominic Ashford. About the listing. There's been a change of plans. But as he was speaking, his phone buzzed with an incoming email. He glanced at it and his blood ran cold. The sender. Morrison and Associates. Legal counsel. The subject line. Urgent. Contest of Eleanor Ashford estate. Court date set. Someone was challenging his grandmother's will. and they were claiming that Dominic Ashford had no legal right to the estate at all. Dominic's hand froze on the phone. The realtor was still talking, but the words became white noise. Someone was contesting the will. After 3 years. After he'd already settled the estate, paid the taxes, signed all the documents. He ended the call without explanation and opened the email. Dear Mr. Ashford, we represent Vernon Ashford, your father's younger brother, in the matter of the Eleanor Ashford estate. Our client has recently discovered evidence that suggests improper distribution of assets, and is filing to contest the will on grounds of undue influence and failure to identify all rightful heirs. A preliminary hearing has been scheduled for November 15, 2019. Your presence is required. What's wrong? Celeste asked. She'd seen his face change. Dominic looked up at her, at this woman who'd been living in his house for 8 months without him knowing, at the family he'd just discovered, at the promise he'd just made. My Uncle Vernon, he said slowly. My father's brother. He's contesting my grandmother's will. Can he do that? After 3 years? Apparently. Dominic scrolled through the email, his lawyer's mind cataloging the implications. He's claiming undue influence, that I manipulated my grandmother into leaving everything to me. And he's claiming there are unidentified heirs who should have been included in the estate distribution. The room went very quiet. He knows about me, Celeste whispered. Somehow he knows. How could he? The private investigator. The one your grandmother hired to find me. Maybe the records. Maybe someone else saw them. Maybe. She stood abruptly, pacing. This is my fault. I brought this down on you. Stop. Dominic's voice was sharp. This isn't your fault. Vernon's been looking for a way to challenge the will since the day my grandmother died. He always thought he deserved a piece of the estate. This is just his latest attempt. But even as he said it, something nagged at him. The timing. The specific language about unidentified heirs. His phone rang. His lawyer, Rebecca Chen, no relation to the nosy neighbor. Rebecca. Dominic, we need to talk. No. Vernon's lawyers just sent over their preliminary filing. It's bad. How bad? They have documentation, birth certificates, hospital records, private investigator reports. They're claiming that Eleanor Ashford had an illegitimate child in 1954 that was never disclosed to the family. They're claiming that child's descendants have a legal right to a portion of the estate. Dominic looked at Celeste. She'd stopped pacing, was staring at him with growing horror. They're claiming, Rebecca continued, her voice tight, that you knowingly concealed this information to maintain sole control of the inheritance. That's fraud, Dominic. If they can prove it, you could lose everything. The house, the trust, all of it. And face criminal charges. But I didn't know, Dominic said. I just found out today. Can you prove that? Can you prove you didn't know before today? He couldn't. He'd been in this house for hours. Had access to the attic, to the journals, to all of it. Any judge would question the timing. There's more, Rebecca said. Vernon's filing names a specific heir. Celeste Marie Harper. And Dominic. They know she's living in the estate house right now. They have photos. Surveillance. They're claiming you've been hiding her there, concealing her identity, while you figured out how to cut her out of her inheritance. The world tilted. That's insane, Dominic said. I didn't even know she existed until today. I believe you. But a judge? With photos of her living in your house? With evidence you've been accessing the property regularly? They're going to think you've been orchestrating this for months. Dominic ended the call. Looked at Celeste, who had tears streaming down her face. I should leave, she said. Right now. Take the girls and disappear. If I'm not here, if they can't find me, then Vernon can't use me against you. No. Dominic. No. He stood, moving toward her. That's exactly what he wants. He wants you scared and running. He wants us divided. Because together, we're the rightful heirs. Together, we can prove my grandmother's intentions. But if you run, if you disappear, then Vernon gets everything. And my grandmother's promise, her last promise, dies with her. But you'll lose everything. Your reputation, your inheritance, possibly your freedom. Then I lose it. The words came out fierce, certain. My grandmother spent 30 years trying to keep her promise to you. To your mother. To the family she was forced to give up. I'm not going to betray that. Not for money. Not for safety. Not for anything. Celeste was openly crying now. Why? Why would you risk all of this for people you just met? Dominic thought about his grandmother. About the little boy she'd raised after his parents died. About the lessons she'd taught him that he'd spent years trying to forget. Because she taught me that family isn't just blood. It's promise. It's showing up. It's doing the hard thing because it's the right thing. He picked up the photograph from the table, the one of his grandmother and 6-year-old Celeste. She showed up for you. The least I can do is show up for her. Over the next 3 weeks, Dominic did something he'd never done in his entire career. He stopped running. He called Rebecca and told her everything. Showed her the journals, the letters, the birth certificates. Built a case not around concealment, but around discovery. Around a grandmother's love that transcended death. He moved Celeste and her daughters out of the shadows. Got them proper documentation. Enrolled the girls in the local school. The same school his grandmother had wanted to send Celeste to 40 years ago. He met with Vernon, face to face, in a conference room that cost $800 an hour. Vernon Ashford was everything Dominic had spent his life trying not to become. Bitter, entitled, consumed by resentment. You're really going to split our family's estate with some woman who broke into the house? Vernon sneered. Some homeless woman with a convenient story about being related to us? She is related to us, Dominic said calmly. The DNA test confirmed it. She's our cousin. And her daughters are Eleanor's great-great-granddaughters. Which makes them more Ashford than you'll ever be. A DNA test you conveniently arranged. That you're welcome to verify independently. Vernon, this isn't about the money for me. It never was. But I'm curious, what's it about for you? Vernon's face reddened. Our grandmother raised you. Gave you everything. Left me nothing. And now you want to give half of it away to some stranger. She's not a stranger. She's family. And our grandmother left her something too. She just never got the chance to deliver it. Dominic slid a document across the table. This is my proposal. We settle. We honor Eleanor's clear intentions as documented in her journals and letters. Celeste gets her rightful share of the estate, held in trust for her daughter's education and future. You get a settlement payment for dropping the contest. And I keep the house, with the understanding that it remains in the family. All of the family. Vernon stared at the papers. At the number written there. More money than he'd make in 10 years, but less than half of what he'd sued for. And if I don't accept? Then we go to court. And I bring every letter, every journal entry, every piece of evidence that shows what Eleanor wanted. And I let a judge decide. But Vernon, you're going to lose. Because Eleanor's intentions are crystal clear. And when you lose, you get nothing. Not the house. Not a settlement. Nothing but legal fees and embarrassment. Vernon's jaw worked. Pride fighting with pragmatism. I need time to think. You have 24 hours. Vernon took the settlement. The court approved the trust. And on a cold November morning, Dominic and Celeste stood in front of a judge as the estate was officially divided according to Eleanor Ashford's documented wishes. Celeste cried through the entire proceeding. Imani held one hand. Zara held the other. When it was over, when the papers were signed and the trust established, they walked out of the courthouse together. What now? Celeste asked. Dominic looked at her, at his cousin, his family, the keeper of his grandmother's gardens. Now we go home. Both of us. The way it should have been from the beginning. They drove back to the estate in separate cars. When Dominic pulled up the long driveway, he saw Celeste and the girls already there, standing in the garden. Zara and Amani were running through the rose bushes, their laughter carrying on the autumn wind. Celeste was on her knees, planting something new, adding to the garden her great-grandmother had started, that her grandmother had tended, that she'd saved from dying. For generations of love, rooted in the same soil. Dominic walked over, knelt beside Celeste. "What are you planting?" "Lavender," she said softly. "Eleanor's favorite. I thought she'd like that. Knowing we were here. Together. Finally. She would." They worked in silence for a while, hands in the dirt, building something new from the broken pieces of the past. That night, after the girls were asleep, Dominic and Celeste sat on the porch, the same porch where Eleanor had once watched a little girl in a yellow dress learn to read. "I spent 8 months living here in secret," Celeste said. 8 months feeling like a thief. And now I don't know how to feel. This is really mine. It's really yours. The trust is set up. The house is in both our names. Your daughter's education is funded. You can go back to nursing school if you want. You can do anything. What will you do?" Dominic thought about the question, about the empire he'd built, about the success he'd chased, about all the things he'd thought mattered before he found a woman and 2 children living in his grandmother's house. "I'm going to slow down," he said. "Spend more time here. Get to know my family. Honor the promise my grandmother couldn't keep. She'd be proud of you. She'd be proud of both of us." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars appear over the Connecticut hills. "Dominic." Celeste's voice was soft. "What made you lie to those police officers? That first day. You could have let them take us. Could have made this all much simpler." He thought about it. About the photograph. About his grandmother's handwriting. About 2 scared little girls watching from the stairs. "I guess," he said slowly, "I finally understood what my grandmother was trying to teach me all along. That the only thing you really own in this life is the promises you keep. Everything else is just borrowed." 6 months later, the house that had sat empty for 7 years was full again. Full of laughter and cooking smells and the sound of children doing homework at the kitchen table. Celeste went back to nursing school. Dominic started a foundation in Eleanor's name, helping families in crisis keep their children out of foster care. And in the garden, the lavender bloomed. For generations of women, connected by love and loss and a promise kept at last. Sometimes the family you inherit isn't the one you expect. Sometimes home isn't a place you choose. It's a place that chooses you. And sometimes, the greatest inheritance isn't money or property. It's knowing that someone believed in you enough to never stop looking. To never give up. To leave breadcrumbs across decades, hoping you'd find your way home. Eleanor Ashford left more than an estate. She left a promise. And in the end, that was worth everything. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that family is about more than blood and that promises matter more than property, then hit that subscribe button. We tell stories like this every week. Stories about second chances, about love that transcends time, about people choosing kindness when the world gives them every reason not to. Drop a comment and tell me, what promise are you keeping? What's the legacy you want to leave behind? I read every single comment, and your stories inspire the next videos we create. And if you love this one, check out our playlist on acts of kindness that changed everything. Because there are dozens more stories like Dominic and Celeste's waiting for you.